Hey there, I'm Stavros Egu and welcome to the channel. Today we're going over the most epic deaths in human history, but more than that, we're talking about the kind of loyalty and courage that makes someone stand their ground when every sane instinct is screaming, run! These are stories of individuals who became legends, not just for how they fought, but for they fought. We're diving into the lives of people who, in the face of overwhelming adversity, chose to be the shield, the diversion, the last line of defense. It's about more than just battlefield heroics, though there's plenty of that. It's about the human spirit pushed to its absolute limit, and then, somehow, beyond. We'll explore the cultural contexts, the personal motivations, and the sheer, almost unbelievable audacity of these last stands. So grab your metaphorical helmet, because we're about to witness some of history's most incredible and often tragic displays of, I got your back, bro, even if it meant facing certain doom. These are the stories of history's ultimate wingmen. Alright, let's kick things off in late 12th century Japan, a period of, shall we say, political restructuring. Our first ultimate wingman is Saito Musashibo Benkei, usually just known as Benkei. And Benkei was imagine a warrior monk, supposedly 7 feet tall, a walking mountain of muscle and devotion, wielding a ridiculous array of weapons. He wasn't just big, he was a legend in his own lifetime. The story goes that Benkei initially set himself up on the Gojo Bridge in Kyoto, challenging every warrior who tried to cross, disarming them, and collecting their swords. He was aiming for 1,000 swords, a pretty ambitious goal, you have to admit, and he was well on his way, having collected 999, when along came his 1,000th challenger, Minamoto no Yoshitsune, a young, skilled, and frankly rather pretty nobleman who danced around Benkei's attacks like a butterfly. Benkei, utterly defeated for the first time, was so impressed by Yoshitsune's skill, and perhaps his sheer audacity, that he pledged his undying loyalty. And when Benkei said undying loyalty, this wasn't a casual I'll follow you on social media kind of loyalty, this was, I will literally become a human wall of death for you loyalty. Yoshitsune, for his part, was a brilliant military commander, a key figure in the Genpei War, helping his half-brother Minamoto no Yoritomo establish the Kamakura shogunate. But, as is so often the case in these historical dramas, success breeds jealousy. Yoritomo, fearing Yoshitsune's popularity and influence, turned on him, declaring him an outlaw. So, Yoshitsune, the celebrated hero, suddenly found himself on the run, with his most faithful retainer Benkei right by his side. Their journey was fraught with peril, a series of close shaves and daring escapes, all while Yoritomo's forces hunted them relentlessly. Benkei was instrumental in their survival, using his strength, his cunning, and his intimidating presence to get them out of numerous tight spots. Eventually, however, their luck began to run out. They were cornered in the castle of Koromagawa no Tachi in 1189. Yoshitsune, realizing the end was near, decided to perform seppuku, ritual suicide, rather than be captured. But seppuku, as you might imagine, takes a bit of time and, ideally, a certain amount of peace and quiet, neither of which are readily available when an enemy army is trying to break down your door. This is where Benkei steps up, or rather, steps. He positions himself on the bridge leading to Yoshitsune's inner sanctum, determined to hold off Yoritomo's entire army single-handedly, to buy his master the time he needed. Imagine the scene: one man, a giant of a warrior monk, armed with his naginata and an arsenal of other weapons, facing down hundreds, possibly thousands of enemy soldiers. Benkei was a whirlwind of destruction. He cut down soldier after soldier, his weapon a blur, his roars of defiance echoing across the battlefield. He was a force of nature, an immovable object against an overwhelming force. Arrows began to rain down on him, but he seemed almost impervious. He fought on, wounded multiple times, but his resolve never wavered. He was driven by a singular purpose: to protect his lord, to honor his vow of loyalty. The enemy soldiers, terrified and astounded by his ferocity, started to hesitate. They'd seen men fight before, but this was something else. This was a demon, a war god, something beyond human. He was taking hit after hit, yet he continued to fight, to stand his ground, his body a shield for Yoshitsune. Legend says he killed over 300 soldiers by himself. Whether that number is exact or not, the impact was clear. He was an unbreakable barrier. Eventually the arrows became too numerous, the wounds too grievous. But Benkei didn't fall. He remained standing, motionless, glaring at the enemy, his naginata still ready. The soldiers, wary, kept their distance, unsure if he was truly dead or just waiting for them to get closer. Benkei was dead, He had died on his feet, riddled with arrows, still guarding the bridge, still loyal to the very end. Next up, we sail across the sea to Korea, during the late 16th century, specifically the Imjin War, when Japan, under Toyotomi Hideyoshi, decided it would be a great idea to invade Korea as a stepping stone to conquering China. Spoilers, it wasn't a great idea, largely thanks to one man, Admiral Yi Sun-sin. If Benkei was the ultimate personal bodyguard, Yi Sun-sin was the ultimate national protector, a wingman for an entire country. Yi Sun-sin is, to put it mildly, a colossal figure in Korean history. We're talking statues, national holidays, the whole 9 yards, and for good reason. This guy faced down impossible odds, political backstabbing that would make a Game of Thrones character blush, and still managed to deliver crushing defeats to the Japanese Navy time and time again. He was the definition of resilience. His early career was a bit of a roller coaster: promotions, demotions due to jealous rivals, the usual bureaucratic nonsense that seems to plague even the most brilliant minds. But when the Japanese invaded in 1592, Korea desperately needed competent military leaders, and Yi, despite previous setbacks, was given command of the Jeolla province's naval forces. This was, to say the least, a good call. Yi Sun-sin wasn't just a brave commander, he was an innovator and a meticulous planner. He understood naval strategy like few others of his time. He improved existing ship designs, most famously the Jeobukseon, or turtle ship. These weren't your average wooden rowboats, they were ironclad, on top at least, spiked dragon-headed vessels that could ram enemy ships and unleash cannon fire from multiple directions. Basically, they were 16th century naval tanks. His battle record is frankly absurd. He fought in at least 23 naval engagements and was undefeated. Let me repeat that. Against a Japanese navy that was often larger and in some ways more experienced in large-scale amphibious operations. He was the tactical genius who could turn any situation to his advantage, using currents, terrain, and psychological warfare. But his greatest challenges weren't always from the enemy. Political intrigue at the Korean royal court was a constant thorn in his side. Rivals, jealous of his success and influence, spread false rumors and conspired against him. At one point he was stripped of his command, imprisoned, and even tortured, all because of court politics. His replacement, Admiral Won Gyun, then proceeded to lead the Korean Navy into a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Chilcheoyang, where almost the entire fleet was annihilated. So, Korea is on the ropes, its navy is decimated, the Japanese are advancing. Who do they turn to? The guy they just imprisoned and tortured, of course. Yi Sun-sin was reinstated, but the situation was beyond dire. He was left with just 13 ships. 13. Against a Japanese fleet that numbered in the hundreds, probably around 333 ships preparing for a final assault. This sets the stage for his most legendary victory, the Battle of Myeongnyang in 1597. Yi, with his baker's dozen of battered ships, faced a Japanese armada. Any sane person would have retreated or surrendered or just, curled up in a ball and cried. But Yi Sun-sin was not just any sane person, he was Yi Sun-sin. He famously said, "To the king, I still have 12 ships under my command and I am still alive. The enemy shall never be safe in the West Sea." He actually had 13 by the time of the battle, one more had joined. He chose a narrow strait, the Myeongnyang Strait, known for its treacherous currents as the battlefield. He used those currents to his advantage, luring the Japanese fleet into the narrow passage where their superior numbers became a disadvantage, as only a few ships could engage at a time. His flagship stood alone against the enemy vanguard for a significant period, inspiring his other captains, who were initially hesitant, to join the fray. It was a masterclass in naval tactics, courage, and leadership. Against all odds, Yi's tiny fleet managed to sink or damage over 30 Japanese warships without losing a single Korean ship. The Japanese were stunned, their advance was halted, and Korea was, once again, saved from the brink. Chapter 3. Ben L. Salomon, the dentist who became a one-man army. Our final story takes us to the Pacific theater of World War II, specifically to the island of Saipan in July 1944, and our wingman here is perhaps the most unexpected of the three. Captain Ben L. Salomon, a U.S. Army dentist. Yes, a dentist. Not exactly the first profession that springs to mind when you think one-man army, but history, as we know, is full of surprises. Salomon graduated from the USC Dental College in 1937 and was happily practicing dentistry in Los Angeles. But when World War II broke out, he was drafted into the Army infantry. However, his superiors quickly realized his dental skills were valuable, and he was commissioned into the dental corps. He was good at his job, known for his skill and dedication. He even offered to fill cavities for his fellow soldiers in his spare time, free of charge. In 1944, he was serving as the regimental dental officer for the 105th Infantry Regiment, 27th Infantry Division. But on Saipan, with casualties mounting, he volunteered to replace the battalion surgeon of the 2nd Battalion who had been wounded. So, there he is, a dentist, now running a frontline aid station, patching up wounded soldiers just yards from active combat. That alone takes guts. On July 7, 1944, the situation went from bad to worse. The Japanese forces on Saipan, facing inevitable defeat, launched one of the largest and most desperate banzai charges of the war. Thousands of Japanese soldiers, many armed only with bayonets on sticks or even just rocks, surged towards the American lines in a suicidal wave. Salamon's aid station, located in a shallow depression about 50 yards behind the front lines, was directly in their path. The aid station was quickly overrun. Japanese soldiers began bayoneting the wounded lying on litters, even those inside the tent. Salomon, seeing this, knew he had to act. He wasn't a combat soldier by primary training, he was a healer. But in that moment, the calculus of survival and duty shifted dramatically. He ordered the other medical personnel to evacuate the remaining wounded to the regimental aid station further back, while he stayed behind to cover their retreat. Think about that decision. He, a dentist, armed with an M1 rifle, told trained infantrymen and medics to fall back while held off the enemy. That's not just bravery, that's a level of self-sacrifice that is hard to fathom. One of the soldiers he saved, a private first class named Edmund G. Love, later recounted what happened. Salomon shot the first Japanese soldier who entered the tent. He then clubbed another with his rifle. He told Love and the others, "Get out of here! I'll hold them off until you get them to safety." He knew he was likely signing his own death warrant. The men evacuated, carrying the wounded, looking back to see Salomon firing his rifle, then manning a .30 caliber machine gun after its crew had been killed. He dragged the machine gun to the entrance of the tent and laid down a field of fire, mowing down the advancing enemy. He was buying precious minutes, minutes that meant life or death for the men he was protecting. When American forces retook the position later that day, they found Captain Ben Salomon slumped over the machine gun. He was dead, but he had not died easily. In front of his position lay the bodies of 98 Japanese soldiers. 98. He had been shot 76 times and had numerous bayonet wounds, many of which he likely sustained while still alive and fighting. The scene was apparently so gruesome, so indicative of a ferocious last stand, that it initially complicated his Medal of Honor nomination. There were rules at the time about medical personnel not bearing arms against the enemy. However, the sheer scale of his actions, the fact that he was defending wounded men under his care, and the overwhelming evidence of his heroism, eventually led to a re-evaluation. It took decades, but Captain Ben L. Salomon was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 2002. The citation reads in part, "Captain Salomon's extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service, and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army." So, Benkei, Yi-Sun-sin, Ben L. Salomon, a warrior monk, an admiral, a dentist, three vastly different individuals from different times, different cultures, united by one extraordinary, and frankly, terrifying commonality. They became the ultimate wingmen, standing their ground against impossible odds, often to the very end. Their stories, while steeped in the grim realities of conflict and death, are less about the dying and more about of their sacrifice. It's about loyalty so profound it defies death, courage that stares down entire armies, and a commitment to others that transcends the self. These aren't just cool historical anecdotes to trot out at parties, though they pretty cool. They're windows into the extremes of human experience, into the moments where the abstract concepts of duty, honor, and love for one's comrades or country become terrifyingly, inspiringly concrete. Thanks for watching. I've been Stavros Egg, and don't forget to be awesome. And maybe, if the situation calls for it, be an unexpectedly incredible wingman, though hopefully with less dire consequences.